correctly.
Just as, go ahead and take this full, David, if you can. Those of you who were with us last night, these are the guys that you spent your evening with, if you will. This is the 7th Cav. They have, if you were with us last night, you know this. It was an extraordinary thing to witness. This is a remarkably clear picture. When these video phones stop down, I assume this is video phone, isn't it? Video phones stop, when the movement stops, the picture clears a whole lot. But you see they've made their way about 100 miles inside of Iraq. They came from Kuwait. They crossed this berm without much difficulty. And last night, for 4 hours or so, it felt as if we were riding with them, which reminds me, if I may, it just is of something else, one other piece of business from last night I want to take a minute and talk about. Again, those of you who were with us last night, there was a moment where, and you know, I'd like to tell you we're really smart and we plan all this stuff, but it's not how it happened. But the fact is that a woman up in upstate New York has a son who's in this unit, and she happened to be watching. She's watching her son, and they were pretty grainy pictures yesterday, but she's watching her son, and she doesn't see him, but she knows that's the unit making their way across the desert, and she feels, as you would feel if it was your son, a lot of anxiety and tremendous pride, both of those things, and she sent us a most lovely email, and we read it on the air. Basically, she talked about how proud she was, and she thanked us, and there was no reason to thank us, but we certainly understood her pride. And this afternoon, I called her up to thank her for her email, and honestly to say I hope that in reading it I didn't embarrass her. People don't necessarily send their emails to us to have them read on the air. And we started to talk about her son. And she said when he left, her name is Rosemary. Rosemary said to him, "Kevin, I'm very much afraid. This is the first time in my life I feel like I can't protect you." And Kevin said to her, "Mom, my turn to protect you." When I read her email on the air last night, this hadn't happened to me very often in my life in this business, I could feel it in my throat. I think we all felt the emotion of that moment. And when I talked to her this afternoon and she described her son saying, "Mom, it's my turn to protect you," it happened again. Her little boy had grown up. We hope Kevin is out there safely, and all of his Army colleagues are out there safely tonight. They've had an extraordinary couple of days making their way, and thankfully they, after meeting a little resistance at the very beginning, on the left side of the screen, by the way, I'll get to this in a second, it's the 101st, we've got a correspondent there, and we'll talk a bit about that. But we spent so much time with the Cav yesterday, live, Walt Rogers reporting, and we'll hear from Walt, I hope, before the night's over. But anyway, they probably are just stopped down. Generally, you think they're just doing another refuel, or have they stopped at their place? Have they stopped where they're going to stop? No, they're making their way to Baghdad.
It would be a guess, but they must be somewhere near the river, because I see greenery behind them. So they're out of the desert somewhere near the Euphrates.
Okay, and we don't want to be any more specific than that. Nope. As you move to the north, what happens is the desert changes, and you get a little more green. And you see none of this green when you're in Kuwait, but as you get into a little deeper into the southern part of Iraq, you start to see some greenery even in the south, and we want to always be careful, and we try always to be careful about giving too much detail on this, but it's a big desert out there, and anyway, it's good to see those guys. I think we all felt, I know I got a lot of notes from viewers, we all felt like we got to know them in a kind of crazy way. Even as we didn't see them, we saw them racing across the desert, and we saw them going past Bedouin tents and herds of goats and wildflowers that were coming up from the desert. And Walt Rogers' stunning descriptions last night of that ride, that bumpy, noisy, not very comfortable ride. We saw them trying to eat their breakfast and refueling. There's some helicopters that do reconnaissance for them. Those of you who were along for the ride last night, I think it is one of those television nights you won't forget. And what made it perfect is that there was no hostile fire, there was no war in front of us. We didn't have to report the worst of the detail of war, but we could just marvel at this combination of cooperation, technology, and just really good journalism that was going on. And we see it again out in the desert, American soldiers walking around their vehicles, and behind them there'll be an infantry division that will move at some point, if it has not started already. We saw a moment ago a picture of the 101st, and we do have a correspondent also embedded in that fabled group of soldiers. We don't quite have contact with Ryan Shilcolt. That's a picture of Ryan, who's done some terrific work for us as well, and hopefully we'll get all of those problems, the audio problems, solved. I think all of you certainly understand the complexity of trying to put live television pictures on from the middle of nowhere. And the middle of nowhere is pretty much what you're looking at out there. In general, we spent a long time with these guys last night. We were both so tired when it was over. We didn't talk much. It was a heck of a ride, though, wasn't it?
They really galloped across the ground here and fulfilled their mission. According to the press that'll be published tomorrow morning, Aaron, this infantry division has raced unopposed across a wide swath of Iraqi desert, and they're on the edge of the Euphrates Valley as of last night in Iraq, and spread out somewhere in central Iraq.
Now, have these guys, just because we did spend so much time with them, have they slept at all?
Hopefully they've given them time, and maybe that's what they've done here. This is early morning in Iraq. Maybe they pulled into this position after dark last night and gave them a chance to look at the vehicles, make sure the weapons are clean, and rest, because there are liable to be some tough days ahead. And even though this is different than carrying 70 pounds on your back and walking, this is still very, very strenuous operations. Even if you're in that vehicle, you're being bounced and jostled all day. You're carrying a lot of gear, and you're under continuous stress, and you get a lot of uninterrupted sleep. So the chance to get 6 hours flat on your back in relative safety, boy, I hope they got it.
I hope they did too. I just want to make this point again, and I hope it doesn't sound defensive, because in no sense do I mean it that way. We are always extremely vague about where any particular unit is, for obvious reasons. And this is, I suppose in this day and age, Iraqi intelligence can throw a satellite dish up like many of you have on your home and watch all the American television networks. But CNN, as you know, really is, in moments like this, the world's television network. And bad guys, in this case in Iraq, sit and watch us. And what we want to be extremely careful of is that we don't say anything that endangers any of those young men you see in front of you. Now, in truth, I feel a whole lot more confident about how I do this and how we do this when you have the former Supreme NATO commander sitting next to you, because he has an exquisite sense of both what we can say safely and what we ought not to say safely. And I know, and I understand, I think we all understand why you get concerned about this. We are as concerned as you. None of us wants on our shoulders ever, either for any reason, accidental, competitive, any of those crazy reasons you can think of, to have said anything or done anything that endangered the lives of any of those young men. And so we are pretty careful. We're not pretty careful. We're very careful. Even before the embed rules were put into place with this agreement with the Pentagon, here at CNN, and I'm sure this is true at other news organizations, internal rules about talking about troop movements and all the rest. For someone who didn't want to sound defensive, I've certainly prattled on a long time about this. Trust me, we think about it all the time. Walt Rogers is out there. Walt, have you? Well,
can I finish
please,
on that?
Go ahead.
Because You know, I did say there's a river there, but it's impossible to go north out of Kuwait without at some point running into that river. It's a very long river, and saying that river's name really doesn't identify the location of the unit in any targetable sense.
This came up just at one point last night, and the general pointed out it's a big darn desert out there. The fact that we know they're in the desert doesn't tell the Iraqis a whole lot.
That's exactly right.
Right.
No, their security is maintained.
Okay. Ryan Schokold, as we said, is with the 101st. We also spent some time with them last night. They were, as we looked at it, getting ready to move out. Ryan, have they in fact moved out now?
Yeah, Aaron, I can report that the 101st Airborne 3rd Brigade is now well inside Iraq. I'm actually with them, been embedded with the 101st ever since we left Fort Campbell. And for these soldiers, this is a pretty significant moment now well inside Iraq. Aaron?
And how does the order? Just describe a bit how it comes about that they move out. Does was there a pep talk? What happened?
Well, first of all, it was in the cover of night. The convoy moved out of Kuwait. Pretty long convoy. There was not any immediate pep talk before. We had been in what was called an assembly area for some time. The pep talks for the troops had taken place a long time before that. It was pretty much a very organized, orchestrated event, a lot of vehicles involved, sort of like being in one big traffic jam, if you will. And there were a lot of stops where they would let convoys in front get farther forward, and then move this convoy forward. So it was kind of like being in a traffic jam, but only all the vehicles belong to the military.
Was it? I want to get to Walt Rogers, who's up on the top screen. Brian, just to stay with me for another minute. Was it quiet? Did the guys cheer? Did they? Just as much sense of the moment as you can.
Absolutely. You know, a lot of the soldiers actually did take pictures as they came across the border. I'm not sure that they were supposed to do that. Obviously, the Army likes to enforce what they call light discipline. In other words, they encourage the soldiers, really try and make the soldiers not use white light. But I must have seen at least 5 soldiers pop out of their vehicles and take pictures as they cross the border. So this is really the beginning. I mean, a lot of these soldiers really wanted, not that they really want to go to war in Iraq, but sitting in Kuwait, they were waiting for some kind of resolution. They either wanted to go home or they wanted this to get started, because the way they look at it, the sooner it started, the sooner it can be finished, and the sooner they can go home. So for moving into Iraq for a lot of these troops was really quite a pleasant and reassuring, actually, thing.
It's become a motto, as you know far better than we do, of a lot of these units, a lot of the sergeants and the young officers, to say to homesick young men who would want to get home. The road home goes through Baghdad. It must have been, at least to some degree, a relief to know that they are on their way, that it's underway.
Yeah, and the feeling. 101st, I noticed when we passed through the border, there was a sign that said in English, "Welcome to Iraq," and it had been left there by soldiers from the 3rd Infantry Division. So obviously, this is a feeling that's shared by all the soldiers. They really wanted to, A, move into Iraq, and B, note that they had made that move. This is an important thing for them.
Now, let me ask you to do something I asked you to do again. Just step out of the way, and so we can get a view of this long,
sure.
Thank you, this long line of military vehicles of all sorts. This is the 101st. Fort Campbell, Kentucky, correct, General?
Correct.
I know that a lot of people, as I looked at the mail today, a lot of people down there saw them yesterday as they were strapping on their helmets and getting ready to roll, as it were, and there must have been some relief. I know it was a relief to them. Again, this is just out there in the desert, thousands of miles from where we are in Atlanta, and you see this convoy, supplies. This is our infantrymen. No, this is an airborne unit, I apologize. They'll be moved around, and We also, up at the top of your screen, out in the desert as well, have the CAV is out there, and Walt Rogers is with them. Walt, are you able to hear me?
Yes, Aaron, I hear you very well. The camera at this moment is pointing out on a fairly tight focus over a field in south central Iraq. What you're looking at is 3 armored vehicles. Each of those armored vehicles has a 120 millimeter mortar on board, and each of those mortars is ready to fire. It's believed that somewhere not too far in the distance, off the back end of those vehicles, there is an Iraqi detachment of unknown size. The 7th Cavalry, 3rd Squadron, U.S. Army 7th Cavalry, has been out scouting since at least midnight, and we are now along a road, again, headed north towards Baghdad, but most of these tanks, the mortar battalion that you see over there, almost everyone is in a firing position. A short while ago, we saw the helicopters doing a reconnaissance of this entire area. There you can see the main battle tanks. You can also see one of the vital ingredients of war, mud. It's raining here. You can see the soldiers all wandering over the tops of their turrets, and what you're looking at is tanks ready to fire if the order goes forward. Again, we have to be very vague and cautious about what our objective is and where we are here in Iraq, but we need to the best we can tell you is we're in south central Iraq. This is, again, the Apache troop of the 3rd Squadron, U.S. Army 7th Cavalry. They continue to push forward towards Baghdad. You can see the 120 millimeter guns pointing upward and outward. It is believed in the direction of those guns, not too far in the distance, there is an Iraqi unit of an undetermined size. There is some hope that when this 7th Cavalry encounters the Iraqi army units, that they will surrender. We saw many people standing beside the road as we were rolling to this position. Iraqis, mostly peasant farmers, standing out there, many of them waving quite joyously, some waving scarves, others waving white flags. There were whole families atop mud huts waving white flags. Most of them were smiling. Again, the objective of this army is nothing more than a regime change in Baghdad. And so I think most of the Iraqi citizens here have a pretty good idea. They have nothing to fear from the cavalry or the 3rd Infantry Division, which is following it. Almost every Iraqi who's aware of anything is now fully aware that this army is moving towards Baghdad. And as I say, there's nothing to fear from it if you're an Iraqi farmer out here in central Iraq. Aaron?
This is the people that you have likely encountered are the Shias of Iraq, one of the religious groups, and this is a group that has no particular love for the government of Saddam Hussein. Obviously, there are people in Iraq who do support the government, but this group, the Shias, would not be among them. The 101st, up on the top of your screen, why don't we, if we can, there you go, has started to move again. Ryan, I don't know if you're still able to communicate with us or not, are you?
I am, Aaron. In fact, I don't have very much time. I don't want to miss my ride. What I wanted to tell you was a little bit about the 101st and these vehicles you are seeing. The 101st Airborne is actually called the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault, and ever since the days when they jumped into Normandy from planes, ever since about Vietnam, they've specialized in moving their troops by helicopters. You don't see any helicopters here, but I would caution you to not think that you won't see any helicopters in this conflict. The 101st Airborne has more helicopters than any other division in the U.S. Army. What you're seeing now is basically armored vehicles, some 5-ton trucks, and some armored Humvees with anti-tank systems on top of them. This is how, should the 101st Airborne need to move on the ground, this is how they move. They don't have the same kind of mechanized stuff like the soldiers that Walt is with. They do not have tanks. They do not have Bradley fighting vehicles. Very much a grunt, if you will, an infantry division. Most of what these guys do is hump 100-plus pound backpacks on on their back. So that's what you can expect to see from them. A little bit about where we are. I cannot tell you a little bit about the environment. This is a very friendly setting. There are some Iraqis moving around in what look like 5-ton trucks. I'm told they are Bedouins also here. They are very friendly. They've been driving by. As they drive by the U.S. troops, they've been waving, the U.S. troops waving back. Really quite a friendly environment so far for the U.S.'s 101st Airborne. Aaron?
Ryan, terrific work. Jump in your vehicle. As you said, you don't want to miss your ride. You're on the story of a lifetime, and we don't want you to miss your ride either, because we don't want to have to explain it here. Thank you, buddy. Ryan Chilcote's with the 100. I'm going to go to Walt in a second. This is one of those questions that we ask because we suspect it comes up. If they're an airborne unit, why are they driving in the desert, General?
Well, this is actually an air assault unit. It used to be an airborne division, and we kept the name for part of the heritage we talked about last night. It's got a great, glorious heritage, but actually it's not jump qualified right now. It goes in with air assault on helicopters, and so they're repositioning on the ground. They're going to move on the ground as far as they can, use the helicopters when they need to make that combat assault in there.
Okay, so at one point they were something, and we talked, for those of you who weren't with us last night, I mean, these names, these units have rich histories in the tradition of the American military. The CAV here, the 3rd CAV, it goes back 100 plus years, right?
That's exactly right.
I mean, it's a remarkable unit. Walter, if you can hear us, did you, along the way, since that opening skirmish, as you came across the border, have you taken any artillery at any point? Have you heard any artillery firing at all? Has it been just a clean, straight drive?
It has been a dirty straight drive. There has been no firing. Dirty because there were enormous clouds of dust. We've had to stop, clean the air filters on our Humvee, and of course the Army has had to clean the air filters on these tanks. It's the most choking dust we've encountered so far because the terrain through which we've traveled has just been very soft pumice, like baby talcum powder. But again, we have not seen artillery. Again, the object of the cavalry is not to engage, but to find the hostile forces which are out there arrayed against it. That's the position we find ourselves in now. The cavalry does believe that somewhere off to the north and not too far is indeed an Iraqi unit of undetermined size. And as you look out, you see the direction in which the 120 millimeter guns aboard the M1A1 Abram tanks are pointed. You have a pretty good idea of where they think that the Iraqi force is. But right now we have not seen anything. There has not been a hostile engagement at this point. There is the possibility that whatever Iraqi units are out there might surrender. Of course, that would be the wish of this cavalry unit because, again, the cavalry is not there to go head-to-head. It is out there to scout and pave the way for the 3rd Infantry Division, which will follow. And again, if they have to engage, they've got more than enough firepower to engage a unit 4 times their size. So engagement isn't an issue. It's just not the goal of this unit. The goal of this unit is reconnaissance to find the fastest, safest way north to Baghdad, and that mission is being performed now. The difficulty, of course, is that the 7th Cavalry may have to fix the Iraqi detachment which is out there, and by fix it, that means hold it, engage it if necessary. Their operating rules are that if it wants to surrender, that's fine. If it shows the least bit of hostility, it will be annihilated. But again, that's not the position of this army. It's not the mission of the cavalry at this point. They're merely trying to punch forward as quickly as possible to Baghdad. Aaron?
And Walter, I know we're going to lose you a little bit to one of the other CNN networks. I will tell you that the pictures you're sending back are, I don't know if you can see them, they're absolutely spectacular. When you pulled the video phone off the shelf, you got the good one, I'll tell you that. When's the last time you slept? When's the last time these guys slept?
I was talking to a soldier aboard a Bradley armored vehicle a few moments ago, and none of us has slept for over 60 hours, and no one slept in a horizontal position in at least that long. They have actually more space cramped up in the tanks than the CNN crew has in its Humvee. The reason being, we're just crammed full with electronic equipment, and I find myself sitting upright almost in a prenatal position, awake or asleep, and there isn't much sleep. So really, there's been no horizontal sleep of any sort for 60 hours, and no one's had anything to eat except a meal on the run. That being the case, I can tell you everyone's adrenaline is pumping this morning. When you smell an engagement coming, a soldier, just no matter how fatigued he may be, loses all consciousness of fatigue, takes his sights. One of the most interesting sounds we've heard around here all morning is the clearing of the machine guns atop the tanks. You can hear them readying themselves for action, clearing the machine guns. You can hear that metallic clacking of the bolt sliding back. Very same thing with the M16 rifles. Of course, you don't have to clear a tank gun to do it, but this unit, the 3rd Squadron 7th Cavalry, U.S. Army, could see an engagement in the not-too-distant future. There's every bit of evidence that there is an Iraqi detachment out there. The only question is, does it want to stand and fight? And as you pointed out a short while ago, that isn't all that likely. It could happen. I probably shouldn't speculate, but the units in southern Iraq, south-central Iraq, tend to be Shia units, that is to made up, composed of Shiite Muslims, and they have no great love nor loyalty to Saddam Hussein because he's butchered the Shia Muslims in the past. Saddam's greatest core of strength lies with the Sunnis. The Sunni Muslims, they are, of course, in Baghdad, and, of course, his own family up in Tikrit. Aaron?
Walter, I know that you need to do some business with CNN International, and I want to let you do that, but come back and talk to us again when you're done with that. General,
my heart's with those troops out there.
Yeah,
They are, they've raced
slept
hard, they've worked hard, they've maintained their equipment, they went through the dust, they went through the dirt,